Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today it is Thursday, the 26th of June, 2025. My name is Carey Holzman, and today, well, we've got a guest on the show that's never been here before, so be nice. Wasn't telling you, I was telling me to be nice. He's got a YouTube channel where he shows repairs, upgrades, selling computers, and even the latest computer tech as he's gone to Computex. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. Well, let me rephrase. I'll introduce him, and then we'll let him tell us about himself. Please welcome in Matt from Matt's Computer Services. Hey, Matt, welcome in.
Hey, Carey. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on the show. I've been a big fan of your channel for a really long time. So it's actually pretty awesome to be here. For those who haven't, seen my content before, my name is Matt. I run an IT company called Matt's Computer Services in Northern California. And for the past 2.5 years, I've basically been on a journey to film as much as I possibly can and basically teach people about the latest tech, how to fix it, how to work on computers, and just shared my journey in the industry from the repair perspective of what I see is going on. And so I have a lot of similarities to kind of what Carey's done and done on his channel for the past number of years. And I'm grateful to be here and kind of just talk shop with him.
That's news to me. You've been watching my channel, so you're the one. Just trying to figure out who it is that's been watching my channel.
Yeah, it must be one of them.
So 2.5 years you've been doing this, where you're fixing computers, or tell us a little bit about how all this got started and more detail.
I started my first IT repair company. Actually, I was in middle school. I started. I had a friend of mine. Me and him were kind of into computers at the time. We were in about 8th grade at the time. We were really messing around with them, and we ended up running into a situation where we had a teacher that dropped a hard drive, and she wanted to take it to Best Buy's Geek Squad, and they wanted to charge her a fortune. We're like, well, we could figure out, there's a couple tools we can try. Figured it out, what we need to do. We're able to get some of the data back that she needed for the project that she was working on. And then actually off of that, basically a business got built off of that, and I've been doing IT work since. So it's kind of been a long journey. I did it all through, so that was 8th grade and middle school, did it all through high school, all through college. And basically I've had a repair company. I was mobile for the first 8 years or 7 years. I basically traveled to people's homes, traveled to businesses, and did everything on site. That was pretty much my go-to way to actually, service people. I would pick stuff up, and then, around right after COVID kind of happened, the business really boomed, and I got a great opportunity to be able to get my own shop, which is what I have now. So I do have an actual physical location, and now these days I am basically just helping as many people as I possibly can. I realized about 2.5 years that at some point you can only reach so many people in your local area. And that's when I started to make videos. At first, I was just making silly tech videos. Things just showing different weird cooling solutions, or even just talking about, heat and how you could basically cook something on a CPU. I did all kinds of crazy videos like that. And then, about 2 years ago, so it was about 6 months in, I just started filming what I do on a daily basis. So any computer that comes in, if it's an interesting issue, basically I just film it as I repair it, and to kind of hopefully teach something in the way, to kind of, create an entertainment experience, but also so that people can actually learn something. Because honestly, I think that's, I want people to fix their own stuff. Honestly, I don't want to fix everybody's computer. I have no intention to do that. But I want, people to be able to fix their own stuff, or even just have the knowledge, so that maybe if they do have to take it to a shop, they can be like, okay, well, it's probably this, or okay, I understand when somebody's explaining, okay, well, maybe it's a RAM or memory issue, and actually what that means or looks like in the grand scheme of things. So definitely, that's kind of been my journey with it. When it comes to both content as well as the repair company, and it's been an amazing experience.
Well, and this is why I wanted to have you on, because I saw a lot of the same values that your motivations and your values are very similar to mine, in the sense that I think I know what you mean. It's
Yeah.
not that I don't want to fix a computer, but
Yeah.
if somebody wants to fix their own computer,
Yeah.
and willing, I'm happy to show them how. But if they want
Absolutely.
me to fix it for them, I'm also happy to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, um, a very similar scenario where I was working and said, I'm going to make videos out of this, and I'm getting paid to do it anyway. Why not make videos out of it? And when I started, there weren't many YouTube channels that were showing things like even building computers, but at the
Yeah.
same time, there also weren't as many viewers as we have. So with one
Sure.
came, a lot more variety, which I'm happy to see, by the way, except I noticed most of it, the vast majority of it, are hobbyists.
True.
And not that I have an issue with it, but there's a very big difference between what you do for yourself and your friends and then
That's
what
true.
somebody pays you to do with regards to what you're held accountable for, being reviewed, dealing with somebody who's upset, things of that nature. So I've been scouring YouTube looking for other folks who are actually working and getting paid, not just sitting on a couch offering advice that they're not ever held accountable for and doesn't
Yeah.
come from any, at least recent experience. And so folks like you, folks like myself, there's a few others out there. Ask Your Computer Guy Scott, as well as Doug Betts, as well as why am I forgetting? There's one other one, but I'm sure there's some more out there. And as I
Yeah.
find them, I'm trying to bring them on because I feel like we're outnumbered by the enthusiasts, and I'm just trying to
Absolutely.
balance that scale a little bit.
Yeah, it makes a big difference when you're dealing with somebody else's hardware compared to when you're talking about your own. And I think sometimes even just like the recommendations you give to people is also fluctuated in it, right? Like um, and I'm from my experience of dealing with things, you know, the recommendations I typically give, like in a particular video of a product or something that I want to showcase, often is stem from the fact like, okay, I've seen this been deployed, used, and have had experience either working on it or fixing it. Like, okay, that makes a good product. So I think that's kind of a different perspective, and I think it's good to have both sides of the industry. I think it's good to have the enthusiasts on one side talking about the latest and greatest hardware, what their experience as the maybe more the end consumer, but it's also kind of cool to see the middleman's perspective, which we kind of play a role in, where we're dealing with both ends at the same time. We're dealing with the end consumer, and we deal with the companies and the product releases and stuff like that as well.
That's a good point. My only, I guess, where I get hung up is the imbalance. If I do a Google search or a YouTube search on how to fix a computer, I will
Sure.
likely find 8 videos from enthusiasts who maybe,
Sure.
or 2 videos from professionals who then, when they're offering their advice, they're doing so as though they were talking to a customer with the same sort of concern for liability. They're not going to be telling you necessarily to go edit a registry or download some third-party utility. Not likely. If they've been in the industry, they know better. Whereas an enthusiast might say, oh, you'll be fine, don't worry about it. But then if there is a problem, well, it's not my problem. It's not my fault you listen to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to see a little bit more 50-50. So if I search and I get 10 videos, I like 5 from professionals and 5 from enthusiasts. And it's like, it's just way off kilter. So I'm trying to do what I can to raise awareness to people that I respect, that I identify and relate to, that have a very similar understanding of accountability and are actually doing the work they're being held accountable for and getting paid for.
Yeah.
So you mentioned how you got started.
Yeah.
And are you working only on Windows machines, or do you do Mac or Linux or anything else?
It's about 90% Windows.
And then the other 10%?
10%, it's like 8 Mac OS, 2% Linux. I mean, it's very, it's usually very specialized projects or companies that need particular operating systems for, but most of the time it's pretty much everything for most of the businesses I serve, which is probably the primary revenue or a primary revenue source for the like a repair side of the company. It's all Windows. pretty common.
I'm looking over here in the chat. Well, you say you've been watching for a while, so you're familiar. We have a live interactive chat room during our live
Yeah,
videos.
absolutely.
And I always encourage folks watching, if they have any questions for you or I, or computer issues they're trying to resolve, to speak up in the chat. And if you see me looking over, I'm looking at the chat room.
No, yeah, I'm looking at the same thing. I got it right here.
And if you see anything on the chat room that you want me to that you want to address, just tell me, and I can put it up on the screen for everybody.
Sure. Yeah. I saw one from Viper King on mine. He was asking about the Fantex Easy Fit system. It's right there behind me, actually. So I haven't had any problems with it.
Let me get that widescreen shot.
Let's go. So yeah, this one right here, that's the Fantex Easy Fit system. It's basically like a DIY custom water cooling kit. Super easy, uses shark bite fittings. Really simple. Haven't had any problems with it. I think the only thing I had when I first put it together was I had one fitting that was just a little loose, but besides that, everything has been great. So it's been great to have.
Yeah, that's something I refuse to do. If it's
I don't do very much for customers. Because customers don't want to take care of it themselves. And that's
so you do it for just for yourself.
I do it for myself, or like I will service somebody's if they did it originally. And as much as I would like to do more of that stuff for customers, most people don't want to do the service that's required for it. Because when you do custom water cooling, realistically, you can't really let the fluid sit for more than a year. But most people that I see that end up getting them, let's say they buy a pre-built with custom water cooling, they almost always end up in the exact same situation where they bought the machine, didn't realize that they had to service it, and then they get 3-4 years in, and the system's the water cooling stuff's completely destroyed, or they just don't know how to care or maintain it. And I think that's kind of the reason why it's like, I'll do it if I need to, but I don't do very much.
Well, and it's sort of like buying a car, not knowing you're supposed to change the oil every once in a while.
Yeah. I think but I think it's even like a step further than that, because it's not like, your normal computer, your service is maybe thermal paste, dust cleaning, that type of stuff. That's like the base level service. But I think a lot of people, for the most part, they're they don't realize that's an additional thing, or they just don't even realize that it's like buying a supercar and realizing, oh, you got to change this extra type of fluid, or and I think that's what people lose track of.
You raise a good point about that, and it's something I brought up many times about people asking me about doing a custom loop, and I'm like, I'm not a plumber. You mentioned shark bite fittings. We just literally were using those on rebuilding the bathroom. I don't want to be a plumber. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'll use an all-in-one. That's fine.
Yeah.
And I think the all-in-ones, they're more maintenance free. You don't have to worry about bacteria and buildup that happens on the custom loops. And I've never had a business client ever ask me for a liquid cooler or RGB or overclocking.
Yeah. I think that's same here. Unless I think I got like one guy. It's like a 3D artist, and he just wanted it because it was cool. And that's like that's.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have.
That's a very small niche.
You wouldn't have
in office space.
One guy.
Yeah, one guy. In the office space, they want black. They don't want it to. They want it to be minimal. They don't really want to see it. They don't really care what's in it. They just want it to work.
Have you been using any of the mini PCs that have come out?
Yeah, I haven't deployed them in business very much. My struggle with it is serviceability of deploying it into a business. That's a big thing for me. I don't like deploying something that's not easily serviceable. So unless it's like a very unique situation, I'll do them for like signage and stuff like that. But for like a general office computer, there are plenty of good options out there. I'm not the biggest fan of having them, as a workstation replacement, even though they probably are powerful enough to do it.
Yeah, they're not really serviceable in the traditional sense, because you don't really need to service them. Like, for me anyway, the way I see it. And it depends on the client and what their needs are.
Yeah.
But most of my clients, they open Word and PDF files
Sure.
and Gmail and all that other stuff. And so by putting them into a smaller footprint of a machine, it's not only a lower electrical bill, they're not running their chair into the, I build these computers, I got to pick them up for upgrades 2 or 3 years later, and they're just all marked up. And then the idea is that if anything happens to it, we just switch it out. They're so inexpensive. The cost of repair, and when we switch it out, usually they're getting something a little bit better.
Yeah, that's true.
And they usually don't need service until out of warranty anyway. So like anything else, if I sold one to a customer and they had an issue with it in warranty, I would swap it for another one. Well, I RMA'd. It depends what it's costing. If we're putting in $200 machines and it's a $200 repair between parts and labor, just put a new one in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that's the situation. I mean, so many systems are disposable anyways.
That's true too. I mean, it's inevitable. About 8 to 10 years, I think, is about the maximum. Most of my businesses, if we go 5 years, that's probably
that's about the number that I'm at with most businesses. I think, and there's some unique situations, like people that are running like RDS. They're basically remoting into like a server, and they're just like a portal. Besides that, pretty much every other company like, if they're a business, I usually say like 5 years, you need to either, you basically need to replace it. I mean, sometimes there's businesses where like we have people in the field where we can kind of transition it to like more of a field operation where they don't need the speed. We'll move them out of the office at that time frame and kind of just like slowly trickle them down if we need to. But typically at that 5-year mark, you start losing the value because, businesses, the time is so valuable, and, you're paying your employees, X rate. If it takes them, significantly longer to go ahead and work, or there's going to be downtime because you're dealing with a system that has, that's going to require more service, it's definitely a lot harder.
Yeah. And, even though the systems I build are fully serviceable, we never really service them. I mean, they just work until
they work for a long time. Yeah.
As you mentioned, it's like, yes, it still works, but we need to replace it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I would take, some of my customers have the original cases. We put them in from 15 years ago. We just keep changing out motherboard, CPU, storage, and RAM. We keep the power supply, keep the case.
Yeah. If you put a good power supply in, those things will last.
They don't get, let's say, USB 3 on the front of the case when we do that, but they still have a case that has an optical drive bay, and we carry that over. And so when it comes to these mini PCs, I'm trying to start convincing them, like, hey, let's just try it and see if you guys like it. A lot of times they're dismissive. They're like, well, I'm sure it's as good. I'm sure it's pretty close. No. I've got some mini PCs that'll probably smoke the fastest computer you've built. And not that I'm turning into an ad for them, but I'm a believer. Yeah. And they're cheaper. They're less expensive. Yeah. So for that, and I've not found the reliability any better or worse than a desktop. And they're both quite reliable. And the only difference is, why bother repairing them when they're so inexpensive? But I was just kind of curious on your take on that, because I'm seeing more and more businesses going to those mini PCs. And I do think, unless somebody's has a specialty need for a certain kind of workstation. Yeah. And even then, they have mini workstations that are pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, they're usually, a lot of the systems, the form factors have gotten, getting good hardware at a smaller form factor is easier than ever.
And it's all laptop components, so it's all low power, low noise, mostly.
Yeah, you can get some fans that are...
What's that?
You can get some fans that some jet engines in there.
Oh, yeah. And I find it, the issue can be with some no-name brand manufacturers that, some AliExpress purchases, if you will.
Yeah, they're slapping them together with different parts in each one. That's something I've come across. Is like some of the no-name brands of like the mini PCs, like they'll just, the quality of the drives or the quality of like who they choose to use, like it's just one. You'll buy 5 of the same, or 5 of the like same machines, and if they're not all in the same batch, they'll be shipped with different technically configurations because of
Yeah,
different
you
drive
might have
company.
Kingston RAM and Kingston SSD in one, and then you'll
Yeah.
have some company that makes the SSD that you have no idea who it is.
And
You've
you're
never
like,
heard of.
I had one from there was one from a pre-built company a couple weeks ago. And it had some SSD I had never heard of, and like even the video did pretty well, and nobody had heard of it in the entire, like, in all the comments. There's probably like 1,000 comments between the video on all platforms. Nobody had heard of it, and I was like, that's very interesting to see something that's that rare.
Do you do any repair on laptops?
I do. Yeah, I do. I do laptop repairs. As long as there's parts availability, that's the biggest struggle.
And
Because
what about like networking or NAS stuff like that?
yeah, so for the business on the business side, yes. So I'll do deployment and service. But again, that's a smaller portion of the business, I would say. I mean, most businesses need pretty small network infrastructure that I service. Most of my businesses are small, medium, so
Yep.
they're usually 5 to 50 employee businesses. So that's like their infrastructure is pretty small on that side of things.
You're based out of where?
Like NorCal, so Bay Area.
Okay. Well, that's a great place. I'm not a big fan of California, except
Oh, I'm not either. Yeah, there's a lot of it's a lot of good and bad.
San Diego, LA, San Francisco. No, thank you. But Monterey.
Monterey's beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Worth
I'm like an hour and a half from San Francisco east.
So you're close enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm close enough to get to the airport, and that's. I don't go over there for anything.
Well, I'm
else.
sure it gets more expensive to live the closer.
Oh yeah, no, if you're in the city or in that area, I mean, there's you're talking average home, a couple $1 million in some of those areas like that,
and a small home at that.
Yeah, I know it's not big. I mean, you're talking right on top of each other. Condos for $1 million.
And then you got to figure out how to pay for parking too.
Yep. Yeah.
That's
not. No, I'm in like a farm town. Like these days, there's a lot of people that moved out here, but it's basically a farm town. We grow most of the corn for California out here. So
wow. Okay.
We're kind of out quite a ways, but there's a good amount of business because of the industries and stuff that are out here. So
well. Yeah, with California, when you get to that area, I think it's almonds, pistachios.
Yeah, so that would be a little further east, a little southeast of.
And then artichokes in Castroville.
Yeah,
Castor. I can't remember the name of it. Castor. Huge, just nothing but artichokes.
Yeah. For us, we're corn and U-pick farms, so like cherry farms. So yeah. So the city I'm in, like we just got named like the U-pick capital of the world or something like that, because everybody comes from all the Bay Area. They like all drive out here, right around Memorial Day, and there's just thousands of cars, people trying to pick cherries.
It's amazing they'll all work for free.
Yeah, absolutely, and charge double.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, you and I are in the wrong business. Are you doing this full time, or is this like a side hustle for you?
No, it's full time. I mean, the computer company is full time. The content is more of a side hustle.
Sure. Yeah. As it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really nice because it's good diversification in this particular industry where you have a lot of. I mean, there's a decent amount of fluctuation when businesses are spending money and when they aren't. This has kind of been a good way to like even everything out and just kind of create this new. It's almost like it's an additional revenue source for the company, which works out really well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to look in the chat. First of all, I want to say hello to everybody joining us in the chat. I see Dustin Fuller and Eddie Casanova, Luke Greenia, Barry Klein. There's Peter Laycock joining us from Scotland with this $10 super set. First day with my new lips.
Yeah.
£10 super chat from Buster. He's Peter Laycock. He joins us from Bonnie, Scotland, where he says the temperature in Edinburgh right now is 57 degrees Fahrenheit or 13.8 Celsius. That's a little nippy. Barry Klein says hello. There's also Thomas McT, and I see Sean Skinner, and Andy W6AD says hello. I also see Tim Davern, and taking a look here, James Prezi and Picard say hello. Ben Laird also joins us from Scotland. Patrick Manny says hello. Scott joins us along with Alan with a Y. And Tweaks says hello. Flashy Singh says hello. Richard DeFries joining us. And I'm just trying to scroll through these as quickly as possible. Looking for any questions as well. If you have questions for us, this is a great time to ask. I just didn't want to be rude and ignore all the viewers, so bear with me.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's all good. I'm happy to
Gaines,
have everybody here. I appreciate everybody coming by.
Mark Gaines joins us from Northern Ireland, and I see, there's previously mentioned Viper King and Nicholas Barlow saying hello. We also see John Williams and Marsman 50. There's a $20 super chat from our friend Gregory Howard, watches us from, I think it's Ohio. Hello, Carey, Mara, Matt, and all in chat. Weather is a stormy 91 with humidity in Western Ohio. I remembered. John Williams mentions that he just updated the BIOS on his Gigabyte B450M DS3H V2 motherboard and noticed Secure Boot is off again. Have to go back and enable it. Yeah, that's no big deal. Sasha Smith says hello. Matt wants to know, how do you know a water cooler needs to be changed? Is it a time thing? You're pointing at something. Hold on, let me get you full screen.
Oh no, I was turning something back on. It kicked off. But yeah. But yeah, water cooling. Well, if you're talking about AIOs or if it's custom, but I'm assuming they're probably talking about an AIO water cooling setup. For the most part, when your water cooler needs to be changed, it's probably because your pump fails. That's or whatever you upgrade to isn't the cooler is insufficient. For the most part, you can kind of run them until they're just about done, or you see temperatures significantly increase, or maybe you're getting a loud noise because you're getting a lot of air, because they do have a little bit of evaporation that does occur. They use those dark tubing typically to avoid a lot of the evaporation that takes place in like traditional like custom water cooling setup. There's a lot of evaporation that happens, but on those ones there's very little bit amount, but over time you'll start to lose a little bit, and once you get those air bubbles, that can sometimes create some like additional noise, and sometimes that can be a sign of a time to go ahead and service your unit or get it replaced.
And then with regards to like a custom loop, should that just be done annually regardless, changing the fluid?
So well, it depends on your fluid type. So from my experience, it all depends on your fluid. A very simple like clear type fluid, typically about a year. I would normally say just about a year of running it is going to be pretty solid, and then at that point you're going to want to at least do a full drain, flush it with distilled water, possibly do some kind of like treatment as well. You don't necessarily have to do a full detail cleaning after a year with a clear fluid, but if you are doing like a show fluid, I'm not sure if anybody here's seen fluids where all of a sudden you have you've seen like the fluid where it looks like it's almost like alive in there, because there's actually like particulates, or solid fluids that have like pastel colors. That stuff falls out. It's a really common occurrence where basically over time, because of the heat, the actual water and the coolant dye or pigment that they add to it will actually separate to the bottom, and that will start to clog things in your loops. For something like that, you're probably closer on the 6-month side. If you're going to do something like a pastel or show style fluid where there is like extra particulates inside of it. And even some of the companies like Primo Chill has their, I think, View fluid and that stuff. They basically say, I think they only recommend having it in your system for like 2 months at a time because it's really designed to like take it to a show it off, and then change it. Or like a true enthusiast, you're changing your stuff all the time.
That's crazy money there, and a lot of labor.
It is a lot of labor, a lot of time.
Rick Lates in our chat room contributes $5 in super chat. Thank you to Rick joining us from Minnesota. Now, let's get to the nitty gritty.
Sure.
One tech to another.
Yeah.
If you don't want to answer any of these, or you don't have an answer, we'll just pass, okay?
Okay.
I want to know, you ready?
Yeah.
Intel or AMD?
Right now, AMD.
Why?
Because reliability. I have a little kind of a trust issues. I don't know how many 13th or 14th generation CPUs you've had fail on you, but
not a single one.
I've had 8 or 9 in the past couple months. And
were
they're
they
all
overclocked?
exact same. What are you saying?
Were they overclocked or overvolted or? No.
They were standard pre-built systems. People had no idea they didn't know that they needed to do the BIOS update. The BIOS update also didn't fix the issue. Like that's my problem. The thing is the BIOS update, all it technically did was prevent new damage.
Right.
But so like if you had I just was talking to a guy. We've changed his CPU twice because he had a very early 13900K S, I think, failure, and we replaced it. Got it warranted by Intel. They sent a 14900K because they didn't have the 13900Ks anymore. So they sent that. This was all. Then he had that system for maybe 6 to 8 months before. 6 to 8 months before that BIOS update happened. He had done the BIOS update even, and by the time that was done, everything was fine for another like 3 months, and then all of a sudden it poked its head again. And then all of a sudden, same exact issue that he had before, exact same instability problems. And typically what I've found with the instability problems, and I have a video, I'm working on it right now, but what I found that happens when the instability problems happen is it's typically a disconnection between the CPU and PCIe interface, which causes typically the pretty obvious sign is when you can't reinstall Windows. That has been the biggest giveaway because people will they'll try to fix it themselves, and then they go to reinstall Windows. Every single time that you try to reinstall Windows, blue screens. Fresh copy, blue screens. Turn off XMP, blue screen. It doesn't matter what you do. You can try on a different drive. You can try everything. The only thing that makes a difference is if you change that CPU. It's been a crazy event where, although I have systems that have Intel processors in them, there's 2 of them right here. Those have Intel systems. This one is AMD. One of my workstations is an Intel system, but right now I'm like 90% of the time I'm recommending AMD right now because of that. Because of just these crazy instability problems on those two processors. The new ones have been pretty good. The Core Ultra stuff, it's not competing on the highest end, but they're heavily discounted right now and are not that bad of a value.
What about the AMD chips that are burning up? Do we give them a pass?
No, I wouldn't give them passed on it, but I think that's also, or at least from what I've seen, it's on the motherboard side. Most of them have been associated with the ASRock motherboards. I think
True, but it's still
AMD's fault that they shouldn't. You should have.
Well, I'm not looking for fault. I guess I'm just saying, and I'm not picking sides. I'm just trying to be the devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, I think I will. Yeah, there's problems. There's definitely problems on the AMD side too. But I think
I like that Intel extended the warranty to 5 years on those chips.
Yeah,
worldwide, doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
And one of our viewers they're living in, I don't remember what country, somewhere in Europe. And they were wondering, what should I expect? And I said, well, I don't know, but Intel, it's an extended warranty. It's one of the best warranties on any CPU you could buy.
Sure.
They It's not different depending on where you live. It's 5 years worldwide.
Yeah.
So send it in and you tell us. Well, he says the minute he sent it in, like within 2 days, he got his replacement. Everything's back.
Yeah, I know they're replacing them. That part, I'm happy that they did that. They handled that part right. I think that the hard part was they denied it for about 6 months.
Well, that's yeah.
Like they said it didn't exist, and
Well,
they didn't say it
were
didn't exist.
skeptical.
They said it wasn't. I don't. Maybe they just didn't have the fix. Like
Here's the
there was
problem.
a period of time where there was like it felt like they were almost denying the reality of what was going on.
It was a pretty complex scenario, right? So you get these complaints trickle in, and you wonder, is this user error?
Yeah.
And then you had 3 different problems they discovered.
Yeah.
So that discovery took a long time, and as they researched it,
sure,
one would argue that this should have been done in quality control.
Yeah.
And they absolutely screwed up. They know they screwed up.
Oh yeah, they definitely.
And I'm not here to defend it, but at the same time, I've built a ton of 12th, 13th, and 14th gen. And let's face it, 14th gen is a lie. It's just a 13th gen.
Yeah, it's 13 copycat. Besides, I think
that's all it is. There's no new node.
Different.
Yeah, it's not really a new generation at all.
No.
So it makes sense. Any problem the 13th gen would have, the 14th gen would have that problem too. It was a lie. So I'm not, beating on Intel's drum here.
Yeah.
I see good and bad on both sides. Absolutely. And I was just curious, like if I was a gamer, I would want the AMD for the better internal graphics. But if I was providing my own GPU, I don't know. I guess it's customer choice. It's all the same to me, I didn't like the 8000 series where AMD basically limited you to Gen 4 and said 95 degrees Celsius regular temp is fine.
For the 8000 series, so that was the APUs, right? The 8600G.
Yes.
Yeah. So
just the CPU itself would run 95C.
Yeah, I mean that was I think most of the 7th, 8th, and 9000 generation CPUs, or at least mainly the 7th and 8000, they were all that way because it was basically, and I think that may have been AMD's fault that they didn't explain it to people that this was a new standard of where that CPU was going to be sitting at, that how the turbo frequency was going to work.
Unacceptable.
I think it was they were just trying to boost those clocks as far as they possibly could. But that's where that came from. But they shouldn't have done it.
Well, here's the thing. What do you think running 95C regularly day to day does to the lifespan?
Oh, it's terrible on the pins right there. On an LGA socket, that's and the amount of heat on those VRM components, because the thing is the CPU might be able to take it, but it's the VRM components that are going to fail on that motherboard prematurely. Yeah, that was
gold star.
Yeah, that's the CPU itself. When we're talking about, it can probably take it. The way that if they were confident in letting it run that hot from the factory, because that was right out of the factory that these CPUs are running really hot, they were confident that silicon was going to be robust at that temperature. But the motherboard manufacturers, who, although let's just talk about like the big three, the MSI, Asus, Gigabyte. Those 3 manufacturers, they have a general idea when they get designing the boards of what they're going to be required with. They're going to get the chipset. They're going to get a general idea of what's happening. But they also are trying to develop budget boards, which is why we didn't see a lot of budget AMD boards when we went to AM5, was because there were so many, there was so much heat that was being drawn in from, so much heat that was being generated around the VRMs. We weren't seeing like, on, was it like, I think A620 was that was their budget lineup, but that didn't come out until almost a year later than it was supposed to. And I think it was probably due to that, is that they had these boards end up having to be way more overbuilt than they necessarily had to, which ends up driving up costs for the consumers, even though it doesn't look like it's AMD's fault.
Those machines behind you, are they Intel or AMD?
This one's Intel. The one like right down there, that's Intel. That's the new generation. That's the Not the Core
Ultra.
Ultra 2, and then the Dinosaur Head. That one's an AMD. I think something 7000. That was just kind of more of a show system. I threw whatever I had lying around in that one. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I'll build whatever the customer wants, but right now I think it just depends on who the end user is. I think for gaming,
But you think the better value on AMD is, but
right now, for most people, if you are, especially if you're running, let's say on the gaming side or on the workstation side, yes, I do think the value and the competitive nature, they're doing a much better job.
I think the 9600X, great value for that CPU.
Oh yeah, I mean,
You're
the
not looking
70,
for like
yeah,
entry level, and you're not looking for super high end.
no, that's
You're on
where
a
for
budget.
most people should be. Yeah, that's most people. That right around. I mean, that's with like the 220 range.
I think it's less. I think it's under 200.
Maybe less than that, 200. Okay, yeah. I mean, even then, yeah. So let's just say in the 200 range. I mean, that's a really solid point to be. I mean, price point very solid. I think that's a 7600X. So that was just, which honestly they're very similar in the generational jump. So I think that's a really solid processor, and I think for most, let's say, general users or gamers, that's where you're going to be seeing your best value perspective, because you're probably not going to be limited on anything, as far as like there's always going to be some kind of bottleneck when you're building a PC. But as far as being a great limitation, unless you're talking, 5080 plus, where you're spending, $1,300 on the GPU, which I'm assuming you're going to spend more on your CPU in that circumstance, you're not going to have a problem.
Yeah, and for me, when I do video editing, I use Cyberlink Power Director, and it just renders like 6 times faster on an Intel GPU than it does on a 3090 or a 4090. Those actually slow down the rendering. So as a content creator, I want that internal Intel GPU.
Yeah, is it the what's the encoding on those ones? Isn't there an encoder?
It's not AV1. I was, at least Power Director isn't using AV1, and I really want
that's what I was thinking. Maybe that's why it was benefiting.
That's what I thought, because it does offer that, but unfortunately, the software isn't off. All I can tell you is I take 2 projects, render one out with the NVIDIA card, and render one out with the internal graphics. The internal graphics smokes it, and it doesn't make. You'd think, oh, I just spent all this money.
I wonder if it's a lack of optimization on the Cyberlink side, because if you were, let's say you were to switch applications, if you were to go to like a Vinci Resolve, or you were to go to like a Premiere Pro application.
Is that what you use?
I use Vinci Resolve.
Okay. I look at Vinci Resolve and I just see like an airline cockpit. It's like buttons and dials.
The way I do it, it's pretty dumbed down. Like,
is it?
Realistically, I mean, I don't make a ton of long form content, but when I do make long form content, I make it on Vinci Resolve. The overall, I mean, as far as like, I only work pretty much in the edit tab. I have a set LUT that I put on all the clips, and that's pretty much it. I don't do a lot of fancy color grading, but that's not my content style either. My content's not flashy. I'd rather just explain things to people or talk about things.
And when using Vinci Resolve, do you notice a difference which GPU you're using when you render?
Well, for the most part, I edit on Mac, actually. So I run it on.
It was nice having you here.
Yeah. So Vinci Resolve runs really well on I think I have an M3 Pro MacBook, like M3 Pro Apple Silicon chip runs super smooth when it comes to Vinci Resolve. Like the performance it's better than most of my than my workstations in some circumstances. Just the scrubbing experience is very, very good. When I have ran it on my let's say my personal workstation, yes, running it on dedicated graphics, you will see a significant boost in performance. Vinci Resolve will take advantage of that encoding, and then it also takes advantage of a lot of RAM. Like it'll eat it up. it'll take whatever you give it, and just it'll run pretty fast. So
Premiere
I think
will
it
do
just
that.
depends on the application you're using.
But Mac is known for that, and I'm just like, okay.
Well, yeah, I
Fair
don't
answer, but
absolutely.
I'm not an expert. I don't know what I'm talking about when it
I
comes
mean,
to Mac.
for like most of the time when I end up editing long form content, it's like a show. So like I was at Computex, and I wasn't gonna bring to get the equivalent performance out of like a Windows laptop. One, I don't think I own anything as powerful when it comes to the applications I needed to use. But two, the bulkiness was like I can't take that. I'm limited to a carry-on and like a in a suitcase with all my other camera gear. I can't take anything else. So that's kind of where like that value is really good when it comes to that. When it comes to the portable workstation, makes sense. Not a big fan of Apple when it comes to other things. And it's pretty much, and the only reason I even have that Mac is because I got an amazing deal on it from like a liquidation deal. And, I paid like half price for it. So I've used it since. I think I paid it was like a $2,200 Mac, but I paid like $1,200. So
Well, that'll make you like it better.
Yeah, of course. I'm like, okay, well, you compare that to a $1,200 laptop. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I want to pick your brain about Computex, but first, I want to go back over to the chat room. We have some questions.
Of course.
And Rick Ash wants to know, I have a 7-port USB hub, but only 4 of them work. Is there something I need to install? It's made by Sabrent.
Well, the first thing I can think of is you may be pulling too much power if some of those hubs are split between USB, like USB transmission back to the laptop and USB for charging. Sometimes that will be the circumstance.
Oh,
that's a really common one. Some of those hubs will require external power for those other ports to work, and also can be the USB version on your particular device. The bandwidth. Sometimes you can get weird handling between your USB driver for your particular output. Like if you plug into like a USB 2.0 port on one of those hubs, it technically should work, but I've seen weird behavior before.
Maybe they need to contact Sabrent support just to find out.
Yeah, I mean, they probably will tell you. And again, like I said, it depends on your model.
Got another question, Fred Vandermeulen. I've heard some solid state drives that are M.2 that are already included with the purchase of a PC can only be replaced with the exact same. I've never heard of such a thing. You aware of anything?
No, only thing, maybe, I mean, you may be talking about like the size of the drive. You may be limited to like a 2230, which is like the short, like M.2 SSD.
The physical size, not the capacity.
Yeah, physical size. Or if maybe it's an older machine, I just had a machine the other day where somebody was trying to update their Dell desktop, and that they bought an NVMe M.2, but that motherboard only supported SATA M.2 drives. So
right. So if you put an NVMe in there, it's not going to work.
Not going to work, and it didn't show up, and that was the whole situation. But that may be the case, but for the most part, NVMe M.2 drives are pretty robust across the industry.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of any specific manufacturer that requires any other specific manufacturer for RAM or storage or even power supply. Scott wants to know, he has a question. When you make a custom liquid cooler, do you have an easy way to change the fluid?
Absolutely. So typically, if you're going to do custom water cooling, you're going to want to put in some kind of drain port. So typically, the lowest point of your loop, the best thing, I mean, it makes it a nightmare if you have to service one without that. Because if you have a port at the very bottom of your loop, wherever that is, you can usually put like a T junction. So basically, where you can turn it off and then add like a little ball valve. This way you can run a little piece of soft tubing out when you need to go ahead and drain it, and everything will just drain right out. And it can make it really, really fast to actually drain the entire rig. But if you don't do that, it's pretty hard, especially if you don't have, if you have soft tubing, you can kind of lay it at a weird angle. But drain ports are pretty cool. I didn't use the drain port type I would normally do, but something that's kind of cool that I like that Fantex does is that in some of their cases right here, they'll have like that little hole right here is actually for you to have that drain port right built into your custom water cooling setup.
So that's
So
what that hole's for.
that's actually, yeah, it's already like pre-drilled for you, which
Wow.
can make that process a little easier. And there's only a few companies that do that type of thing, or sometimes they'll have like a fill port too. Like if you do want to rig it into your setup, but you do have to like plan that out ahead of time. If you try to, it's no fun to try to add it afterwards.
Question from Born Joker. Do you think it's okay to use a Thermalright all-in-one? So for people who don't know, Thermalright is a very discounted, they make discounted fans and coolers. I've never used one yet, but have you?
Yes, I have used a number of them. I would say you get what you pay for. A lot of them don't have great instructions. The overall quality mounting, not the best by any means, and is probably that's my big gripe with Thermalright. So I think when I saw them at Computex, they also are like a very like mass-produced company. Like they have like 40 to 50 SKUs for just like AIOs. I made a video showing like you basically could get whatever you want it to look like, any orientation, any size. Pretty much if you want a small screen, big screen, a round screen, you want a curved screen, like they have pretty much everything. And I just, quality control, I would say if it's something that's going to be deployed and it's mission critical, probably I'd spend just a little bit of extra. I would, my brand of choice, if you can fit it in your case, the Arctic coolers are some of the best. But, I would say that for if you're trying to save a little bit of money, the system's just used for gaming. It's not the most mission critical. I don't think they're going to leak, but pump failure, you might have that a little earlier than some of your other machines.
I've heard, and I've not tried myself, that the Arctic cooler is a little more time-consuming, challenging to install the block. You not find that?
On Intel, yes.
Well, that makes sense. I use a lot.
So yes, on Intel it is a little bit of a pain because you have to remove the is it LLM or ILM the bracket around that the retention mechanism for the CPU socket.
Right.
That has to be unscrewed because it uses a contact frame.
Oh, well, that's not a bad thing, though.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's actually good for your CPU. It's just an extra step.
Yeah.
Other than that, really easy. I mean, the fans come pre-installed, so it's pretty. That part I love because I'm always trying to save a little bit of time. Fans come pre-installed. They're all wired together with a single cable down to if it's the ARGB version, an ARGB header and a fan header, and that does the pump as well as the 3 fans or whatever setup you get. The only other thing to kind of note with those ones is that they are thicker than normal, so they don't fit in every case.
Oh,
so your traditional radiator is like 30 millimeters.
But that's probably why they cool better.
Yeah, exactly. They're 38.
They're what?
I think they're 38.
So just a little bit bigger, but absolutely. I'm sure there's cases that's just not.
There's a lot of cases that it won't fit, or it's not the case necessarily. It has to do with like when you hit like the motherboard VRM or the RAM modules, because what happens is you end up coming down just a little bit lower, and on some cases where there's a lot of tight spacing between where that radiator mount is and where that motherboard sits, or if the motherboard doesn't sit like back compared to the location of where the radiator is. Sometimes like on cheaper cases, they will sit like perfectly directly over. On a little bit, I would say nicer cases, they typically pull it out because they know there's a little bit of more of a room need. You can have sometimes some fitment issues.
Corey Man wants to know, what about the ARM, the ARM chips? When are they going to take over? So have you had any experience with those?
I played around with last year I played around for a while with a Microsoft Surface laptop with the Snapdragon processor, and it was really smooth. Like, it was the closest, like, I don't know, the reason why people I think like the Mac, let's say the systems, is they feel very snappy, and I think that's part of its software to hardware acceleration, like optimization between the two. But when it comes to the ARM CPUs, it was one of the smoothest experience browsing Windows-based applications I've ever seen.
Do you think that they're going to take over?
Probably not anytime soon, because they're still I think they have to. You have to. Not every application worked right away, and then you have to usually use some kind of like interface to interact with old applications, which I think that's the limiting factor.
Yeah, the translation that has. I mean, Apple had the same problem with the M chips.
Exactly. So when they switched to Apple Silicon, there's that transitional period. It depends.
Optimize the software for that chip.
Yeah, and I've talked to people that work at Qualcomm, and they're really confident in it. But and these aren't people that work like for the company, but that work as like suppliers or work in like relation to them. They're like really confident in the technology. But I do think there's benefit. They're super low power draw, so you can get great battery life. So I wouldn't be surprised if it takes over on the laptop market, or maybe even like the mini PC market, because you could get some really low power draw machines that don't need a lot of extra. So like I wouldn't be surprised if like that's what ends up being used for like all like digital signage, that type of stuff, because you can basically get the power draw so low.
And that means quiet fans
Or no fans. You could go passive cooling. And that's honest. I mean, and I think in the business sense, yes, it's going to make sense for some stuff, but I do think there's going to be some, limiting factors to get like desktop users to accept it.
Well, I think it's really on the software side now. They start optimizing software for it.
Yeah.
You just have to wait. It's a kind of a chicken and an egg kind of scenario there.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Born Joker wants to know, what speed solid state drive do you need to keep up with RAM that's 6000 CL30?
Well, your SSD speed isn't going to probably be a limiting factor to your RAM speed. I think that's maybe a misconception. Like your RAM, I mean, the best way to think about that is your RAM is used as your computer's short-term memory of handling multiple things at once. Basically, the interface, what communicates between your SSD and RAM is basically when your RAM has to read data from your drive to move it into RAM. That's kind of the only thing where it becomes like a limiting factor. But honestly, if you have any NVMe drive these days, I wouldn't be worried about it.
Luke Walker wants to know, Matt, would you spend your own money for Noctua products, fans or coolers, for the cost or to the benefit, or is there any?
Well, there definitely is a benefit for the quality that they put into their product. The build quality and construction that Noctua puts in for their coolers and fans are some of the best. And if you are talking about like getting some of like the best fans, noise to performance wise, yes, they're great. But they're expensive. And I do think there are good competitors. And I think all the other brands seem to be getting really good options to compete against that are dropping, noise levels in accordance to maybe higher RPM fans. I think we're starting to see that. A lot of brands are moving to new materials for the fan blades. I've seen brands start doing like metal fan blades or different materials rather than the traditional plastic that helps with like cutting down on some of the noise levels. But I think that's something that's gonna be a factor. Be a factor for sure. But for me, I probably wouldn't buy one personally for my own stuff, just because I know there's a lot of other great options. But if I'm buying something for, let's say, somebody that wants to build like just a workstation and they just want it to work, they want solid cooling, they want it to be quiet, and they don't want any problems, yes, the long-term experience with Noctua products has been great every time I've experienced them.
I would agree, but I would counter that. It's not very often I'm changing out fans in general. Like they've all
most
gotten
of them are
better.
pretty solid, and pretty robust. I mean, even
Back
cheap.
when Noctua first kind of was entering the market, there
Yeah.
was quite a noticeable difference in quality, noise. They're ugly.
Yeah.
It doesn't match anything in that
unless you
brown.
go you pay extra for the Chromax, I think is what they're
That's
black ones are.
exactly what I do to get it
Yeah,
in black.
the Chromax ones, or their industrial fans. Have you ever played around with those ones?
I accidentally ordered the industrial fans,
Yeah.
and I had to talk like this.
Yeah.
They're so loud. I was like, "What
Yeah.
is this? This is
Yeah.
not Noctua." And then I saw the word industrial, and I ordered the wrong fans.
They're good. I mean, if you're working with your headphones on all the time and you want the best cooling possible, I mean, you could set your fan curve accordingly, but you do need to change your fan curve based on them. Like you can't run them. Like I wouldn't run them past 60% until you are under extreme load. So, and if you want to do that, you get pretty good cooling.
I did not know that was an option. So I bought them thinking Noctua fans, a Noctua fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
I put it in. And then the noise, I was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I didn't know they made a noisy fan. But it was also
they're like
blowing papers off the desk, 20 feet away.
Yeah, they're really high. They're high RPM. They're like 3,000 RPM plus. But there's some, like, Cooler Master was showing off like just standard 4,000 RPM 120 millimeter fans, but those were the metal fan blade ones. They're aluminum fan blades, and noise level was way better. But they're like, it's still. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be some loud stuff.
I'm looking through the chat. I think there's about 2 more questions here. One is pretty vague, but I'm going to see what you do with it.
Okay.
Al wants to know if you ever heard of a get CA caps error. I mean, we have no point of reference. We don't know what he's talking about with regards to Windows 10, Windows 11. When did it start? When do you see it? What's it in reference to? But I didn't know if maybe you've heard of that error before.
Not.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Not something I've heard of, or not something that rings a bell.
We'd have to know when you're seeing the error, and how long has this been going on? What are you doing to cause that error to come up? Are you starting a piece of software? Is it starting when your computer starts? When do you see it?
I bet it's probably some kind of software or driver related issue. I wouldn't be surprised.
Then I see another question here. Born Joker seems to have some sort of fascination with SSD speeds. Whoops, am I bringing up the wrong one? Oh, there it is. What speed solid state drive would bottleneck a system, like a 3,000 read write or 5,000 read write?
Realistically, it depends what you're doing, right? Like, if you're gaming, the load times, yes, they're going to be a little bit faster when you go from 3,000 to 5,000 RPM, or 3,000 megabytes per second. But it's going to be negligible, as like it's going to be a limiting factor in your performance. If it hinders, normally right now, the price between, let's say, like an old Gen 3 drive and a Gen 4 drive is about the same price. So, which is about, that's the base speed of Gen 4 is about 5,000 megabytes per second. And so I wouldn't buy the old one. I would just buy whatever
the same
whatever
price,
you can fit in your budget. If you are doing like high data transfers, yes, it would be a limiting factor. But most people
But what would you be doing transfers to that could take that speed other than something else nothing external?
Yeah, not unless you have really fast networking. But most people, if you're talking about 3,000, 5,000 megabytes per second, you probably don't have.
Even if you're talking 3,600 versus 7,200, it's probably about 6 milliseconds of difference in actual.
It's going to be very. It's a benchmark. You're not going to probably know the difference, but I would buy the faster drive if it's
for the same price.
If it's the same price, or if it's within a couple dollars, sure. Because we don't know. direct storage is something that's been talked about a lot. That will eventually be a little bit of a bigger deal to have faster storage, but that's not widely used.
How long they've been talking about direct storage now?
Forever, and they will continue to.
Any day, I'm sure.
And I think, but okay, in those situations, yes, okay, it's nice. But even then, SSDs are cheap enough where if you buy a slower drive and you end up wanting something faster down the road, like a 1 terabyte drive, that's, let's say, a 7,000 megabyte per second drive from a decent brand is about $70 to $75. And okay, that's not a very expensive cost down the road if you need to, get something faster because what you have is not keeping up.
That's a fair point, but I would struggle to find a human being that could actually show me that outside of a benchmark software, regardless. But the psychological effect it has. I mean, if it's working, I guess buy it. But
it's also,
I'm with you. If it's the same price, get the faster one.
I think also sometimes people don't realize that maybe the bigger factor is what you have running in the background of your computer. And you could buy a Gen 5 drive and slow it down theoretically to like a speed where it felt like it was moving at, a Gen 4 drive. And that's half the speed.
Sometimes faster can be slower.
Yeah, because it just depends what you're doing and what you got going on.
That's very true. Ryan wants to know, question for both of us. Here's a loaded question. Be careful. Because you're going to start a fight. Yeah. What are the top 3 best cooler brands? Noctua, Be Quiet, and who else? I mean, he's assuming maybe those are samples, not his.
Yeah. I mean,
what do we define as best, though? Best value, best looking, easiest to install, longest lasting?
They're all different because, I would say if you're just talking pure performance, I love Arctic because that price to performance, they have some of the best coolers. I love their Freezer 36 air cooler, and I love their Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 AIO. Both of them, when it comes to where they're competing at price, they are from a major brand. I'm not talking about the cheap brands that you'll see one-off. They're probably that's probably my choice. 9 times out of 10 for like a value. When it comes to looks, it kind of depends what ecosystem you want to be in too. Like when you start talking about like RGB and screens and stuff like that, you can go all the way up to like, the Trix panorama, like that type of stuff. Like that's sure. They make a really solid cooler that looks really cool.
But it's not the best functioning cooler.
No, it's not the best functioning, and you're about 3 times the price of that Arctic one. So that's like, I think it depends on what you said it perfectly. What are you talking about when it comes? Are you talking value? Are you talking performance? Are you talking looks? Long-term serviceability.
I feel like the internet likes 2 things. They like absolutes. Like, what can I do that's, going to always give me this answer, right? There's always going to give me this nothing. There's no such thing as an absolute. Yeah, they're looking for like a blanket statement. What's the best? And the best way I explain it is I go, well, if I have a Kit Kat chocolate bar and I have a Snickers, which one's better? Yeah. There are choices. If you don't like choices, are you sitting down? I don't want to knock you off your seat. If you don't like choices, buy an Apple product. They'll make all the decisions for you so you don't have this burden. You'll get the same thing everybody else gets, and they charge you extra for that service. But if you like the freedom of choice, the reason why there are i3s and i5s and i7s and i9s and Ryzens and all these other chips and Threadrippers is to accommodate each of us as an individual. So if you're asking me, what is it that I like, or what is it that you like? Your values, although I think you and I values are more similar than they are different, probably. But I don't know the audience, and I don't know the countries they live in and how the prices vary and the part selection.
That's a big deal too. I see that all the time. I make a video. I say, oh yeah, this product at this price point is so good, and then they'll say, oh well, in my country it's 3 times the price of this other brand. I'm like, well, it's not worth that.
Well, I've also seen people compare their dollar to the American dollar.
True.
Well, you know, in Australia, okay, but Australia's dollar compared, you need like 3 Australian dollars to equal 1 American. Well, in
Absolutely.
Canada, okay, Canada's worth about 56 cents per dollar.
Yeah.
So when you do the math, it's really not usually that far off. And
Mhm.
people think, well, you know, in my currency, it's twice as much as in your currency. When in reality, when you do the conversion, if you add in whatever exports or tariffs fees that are on that, it's usually pretty dead on. But you know, that's your government to blame for that if there's these tariffs and import fees. So
True.
yeah, I think for me, what I use a lot of, whoops, I'm not on the screen. What I use a lot of for coolers, I used a lot of Scythe branded air coolers. I think they're a great bargain. But
Yeah.
lately, the shift has been so much more RGB.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, if we're going to do RGB, the air coolers aren't the best thing to look at.
Yeah.
So, and I hate the giant, like everything now is dual fan air coolers. And
Yeah.
I can't stand it because it covers up your RAM. It's all you see through the case window.
It's
Just give me a large heatsink with one fan. That's all I
so
want.
that's why I like that Freezer 36, the air cooler. And my favorite, the thing that they did that I know you'll appreciate, Carey, is
Yeah.
it's the easiest fan mount for a tower cooler I've ever seen. The fans snap on. They use little buckles with little screws at the end, and they just snap on either
Okay,
side.
but what
There's
if you
no
have to replace the fan? What do you do?
it's a screw. There's like it's just like it goes into the normal screw holes that you would have on
Okay.
any fan.
Okay.
It's just like
Good.
it's just like a Phillips head screw.
I want to bring that page up here. Hold on a second. Let me try to think how I can do this without. Oh, I guess I did bring it up, didn't I?
Yeah, you brought it up. I can see it.
So this is, and it's cheap. I mean, it's a lot cheaper than the Scythe. Have you used a Scythe cooler?
I've used it on a couple customer systems, but I haven't had it personally.
So the Mugans are the ones I like. So like the Mugen 6. So I'll buy a Mugen 6 and I just won't put the other fan on it. So for whatever reason in silver, which again, it's unsightly. So I don't want the silver one.
Yeah.
Hard to tell the color there.
Sure,
But if I go over here to the black version, there's 2 fans. I just don't put the rear fan on. I just keep the front fan on near the RAM, let it blow through, and throw the extra fan in the motherboard box as a spare.
Sure.
And this is super easy to install. They include a screwdriver, a really nice screwdriver that is worth keeping for other projects, not even computer related. It has to go, it's really long. It has to go through the top of the heat sink.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty common. One of those.
And they don't give you a cheap screwdriver. It's a really nice driver.
That's nice.
But not that they're paying me. I wish they were, but I switched over now and I'm using a lot more liquid coolers because again, that's been sort of the trend here is customers or viewers even wanting to see more of that. So I've been sort of all over the map. I've got, you know, I have an Arctic cooler here that I have. Oh, I've got 2. I've got a Liquid Freezer 240.
Okay, so that's the old one.
It's old?
Well, it's not the old. It's just the last generation one. It's still really good, but it's still that larger, thicker radiator.
It amuses me because I probably bought it a long time ago, and it's sitting still shrink wrapped on my shelf because I haven't gotten to it.
Yeah.
So I've just, that figures. You know, time flies.
Oh,
and then I've got a giant one. It's a, it was cheap. Hold on, I got to walk around the table. Since you're familiar with Arctic products, I don't need to pick it up and show it to you, but I can at least read what it is. It is an, no, maybe I can't.
Is it the 421?
I don't think it's that big. Liquid Freezer 420.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge box, right? That's like that like angled box.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a rectangular box. The box has a cut in it, so it almost looks like a geometrical shape.
Yeah.
And I've not taken it out. Is that an old model too? Probably.
Yeah. So the three came out last year. And they technically have like a 3 Pro now too. That's new, but the 3 is probably the latest. Would be like the latest model.
Are they still good? I mean, do you still recommend?
Oh, absolutely. No, I would still put it in. No, I would use it. There's nothing wrong with it at all.
Okay.
The twos that was still one of the best coolers at the time when that was out.
Well, that's why I bought it. That's what I had kept seeing over and over.
Yeah, value wise, I mean, they were pretty really solid deals. Like you're talking about
thermal, right? Yeah,
yeah. I mean, for what I would consider a major player, like as far as major player brand, that's like I don't know. Sometimes the Thermalright stuff, I'm a little sketchy. Sometimes like how fast they're able to put out so many different coolers and like change different models. I'm like, it's a little interesting
for sure.
But from like when you're talking about these big brands, I would say like that they've always had a really good product, and that liquid freezer too was highly praised. You know, the overall quality, fitment, ease of installation's not bad at all. I think the new one's a little easier, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah, I think the pump is a little ugly, but
well, yeah, it's got that VRM fan on it. A little fan on the top.
I was thinking of this liquid freezer 240 I'm looking at. It's got this weird angular pump that just looks
there's weird. A fan right there, I think, too.
Oh, there is. All right. Well, it's still shrink wrapped in the box.
Yeah, it's like right on the edge of the pump area. There's like a little VRM fan. So that's why it looks kind of weird. The new one looks more standard to like what everybody else is doing for the most part.
Let's bring up your YouTube channel because I want to talk about that for a minute here. And thank you for everybody in the chat room for chatting and hanging out and interacting with us. Let me see if I can do this right. If I go, this is so confusing the way I've got this set up. Let me turn on my window capture and then let me switch to, I see I should have opened this in a different browser. That's my problem. All right, well, we're going to bring up the StreamYard screen here for just a minute. And then let me see, let me go full screen here. Whoa, there goes our video feedback.
There you go.
There we go. Now we should be able to see your channel, Matt's Computer Services, 111,000 subscribers, 1,300. Somebody's been a busy boy, 1,300 videos.
Yeah.
And
most of them are short form, though.
Well, still, short form ones are usually the ones that take the longest to make.
They do feel like they take a long time. Like, but I do about one a day.
That's admirable. I can only do one a day if they're live. Let's see. We've got some machines here. You recently, let's go over to videos. Your most recent videos, you were at Computex.
Yes.
Now, that's what, a 13-hour flight?
It's 14 hours there from San Francisco.
14 hours there.
Yeah.
You were there how many days?
7.
And you only got 4 videos out of it?
Well, those were, so it's 4 videos for long form, and then there's probably 15 short form videos. But
I want to pick your brain about it because you were there last year too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've never been.
Yep.
And I'm not a big fan of crowds.
Yep.
And so I stopped. If I went to CES, I did it because I was paid. Because it's just claustrophobia, anxiety, people everywhere. You can't find your way out of the casino. I'm only 4.5 hours from Vegas, and I don't want to go. Like it's always crowded in Vegas, but and then nothing's all in the same place. You have to go from one hotel to another. And it's all day just to get 3 things done. Takes 8 hours, 9 hours, and then go back to the hotel and edit it, and maybe get to bed by 2, 3 in the morning just to turn around 7 in the morning, hit it again. And man, I'll tell you what, I'll let somebody else do it. And so when you told me that you were going to Computex, I said, yes, I can live vicariously through you. Yeah. Tell us about the highs and lows with regards to your experience and what you saw, the gear.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. The last time I was at CES, there seems to be themes. So initially, let me go back to the first time I went to CES. It was just a whole lot of MP3 players and a whole lot of televisions. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You know, I've seen enough MP3 players and televisions.
Yeah.
And the next year I went, and it was it's like two main things. You just get overwhelmed with seeing the same thing over and over again. And I would find one of the other smaller halls where they had the smaller Asian manufacturers that couldn't afford the main floor booth, and that's where they had all the weird, goofy stuff that was really the bizarre. So is Computex at all like that? Is it completely different?
So the difference, so CES, from my experience, so I've done CES the past 3 years. Yeah, the past 3 CESs I've been there. CES is very spread out, especially for our industry. If you want to just see like general tech, yes, it's on the showroom floor. But the like companies that, you know, me and you deal with, and most of the people that, you know, are watching this, you know, live actually care about, those are going to be, let's say those are going to be companies, let's like the Thermaltake, the Asus, the MSI, the Gigabyte, those types of brands, they're all in suites. So they're spread out across the entire strip at different hotels, typically separate from the general crowd, because they don't let the general crowd go into their suites without an appointment. Right. That part that's kind of the pain of CES, is that you have to go everywhere because everything's spread out. Computex is kind of the exact opposite. All the brands are, I would say 90%, 95% of the brands are all within the convention center. They're on the floor. And they typically like instead of it being CES, it's Samsung, LG, Sony, like those are the big brands. Computex, it's MSI, Asus, Gigabyte, Acer, you know, those types of brands. Those are the headliners of the show. So, or, you know, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, but that's where so 90% of the content, like at least for me, is on the floor area, and it's pretty much only hardware companies. CES, it's very, very broad. You're all consumer electronics. So that's really the big difference there. There were some companies that, yeah, of course, they were in their own suites and stuff like that, and I went to a number of those. And usually there's smaller brands that don't want to they're either smaller brands, or what they're trying to get out of that show is they're not trying to sell to like the public. They're just trying to get media attention. For instance, Fantex is a perfect example. Their appointments there were a majority themed towards media. Like they just wanted coverage of their stuff. So they had a private suite where you could film. There's only one creator in there, so you can basically make sure the audio is good, and you can create as much content that you want with their stuff, which is really nice. There were some brands that did have some like extra suites that were like separate from like the showroom floor. You know, Gigabyte's a good one that they had like a separate little area. If you were, you know, creator type thing, you could go. But it is like it is like everything's together, which can be kind of annoying because it's, you know, it's nice because everything's together, but it can also be annoying because everybody's on top of it, like on top of everything. And if you go to the last day, they let the general public in. So I didn't even go the last day.
This is my thing with CES and Computex. It's already being covered by somebody else. What am I going to do? Oh, you know, all these other content creators already covered the MSI booth. They already covered Fantex. Or they already covered. So because it's all together, find the little hidden gems like I can at CES. You know, for me, it's like, why am I just going to go there and do everything the same as everybody else is already doing for a 14-hour flight back and forth, and the cost of the hotel and the passport and packing? And no, you know, this may be just me getting older, but I think I was just born older, because never has that sounded like how I want to spend my time.
I think you're right about it. It's really hard to compete with the larger media. You know, it's like I said, you know, like my channel is, you know, is tiny compared to some of the people covering it. You know, especially when you're talking about like,
even if your channel were big and another big channel's already
exactly, they cover it first and then they get the views for that. It's hard to sell. So usually for my content is like, I just focus on whatever the most unique thing is at a particular company, and I make that video. And I usually try to bring a little bit of my perspective on it. So like, I'll say, for instance, Asus had like a VIP event at the beginning of the show, like before it started. I got invited, and I was very grateful for them inviting me. But one of the I made 2 videos at that VIP event, and one of them I praised them because they did something really cool. And then the other one, I was very critical of. Basically, they had it was like a desktop sized tower that was like a mini ITX sized tower, but they were using like a laptop, CPU, kind of like a mini PC, but it wasn't a mini PC. And I said, that's a terrible idea. And that I don't get that, because when I think about the serviceability, well, this is not a standard size. They weren't using a traditional cooler. The cooler was like heat pipes running to like almost like a radiator, but it went off to the side and was mounted on the back portion of the case.
Did
And
you
then
ever?
it didn't use standard power adapters. I'm like, this is like, I don't get the product. And that was my perspective on it. And, that video did pretty well because, honestly, I just wanted to tell people like, yeah, I probably wouldn't buy this. I probably wouldn't recommend it. It's also a possibility that product never hits the market too. So that's the thing. And I think that was like my perspective, or a lot of other things I like to cover were, I'm not sure if you've played around with BTF or not.
Yeah.
The back to front rear connect. So
Yep.
The last generation of BTF, the big problem was if you wanted the BTF GPU that Asus had, which is where the power cable goes through the power cable for the PCI or the 12+4 pin goes through the motherboard's power, instead of having like your own cable. The problem with that is that if you bought that GPU, you could only use it on a BTF motherboard. And so that was like one of my problems with it. Well, they fixed it, and I was praising them because I was like, well, what they did was they actually made that little section removable, and they overbuilt it where it could handle up to 1,000 watts of power through the motherboard. They made it removable and added an additional spot where there was a hidden connector where if you wanted to use a traditional cable, which I was like, well, if you could use this product for, you could actually still sell it. It's not limiting who you can sell it to. It's not limiting when you want to upgrade your system on a technology that we're not guaranteed that's going to be here tomorrow. And that was like my real feeling about it. And I think that was what I was trying to like really perceive. And that was kind of the way, like nobody was covering it in that way. Like nobody, deals with like long-term serviceability in the same way that, maybe me or you do, or, some other more like repair style content does, because, we have to deal with what that ends up for the consumer in 5 years.
Correct. Yeah, that long-term sustainability. And when you were talking about the that mini ITX case with the pipes that went out to the back, what you just described, because I don't know how familiar you are with the stuff from the 90s, the shuttle PC cases. Exactly. The shuttle looks like a big shoebox, a little bit taller. Okay. And when you opened it up, it had a flat plate sitting on the CPU with pipes coming out with a radiator right up with a fan on the.
Yeah. Okay. I know what you're talking about. That's kind of how this one was. It was that type of style. It was just like, it was some interesting choices. I'm like,
but it's like, especially as you get older and you hear a song on the radio that some new band has remade, and all the kids think it's a new song, and you're like, that's a remake of a song, and they don't know that. I feel like, you look at that tech from Asus and you're like, that's just a reboot of what Shuttle was doing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of originality there. So that part of it's disappointing. But, a lot of this is also catering to different crowds, right? Depending on, some people don't care about serviceability.
True.
I think most people do. Most people don't want to have to service it at all.
Yeah, true.
So if you don't have to service it at all, then who cares?
Yeah. But when it comes up, it's a pain when you do.
And you get to break the news to the customer. The thing you bought is not upgradable.
Yeah.
The thing you bought 2 years ago.
People buy like one-off brand or something.
No, even HP. They'll buy an HP. It'll run great. And then they'll say, oh, can you fix it? And you go, oh, this can't be fixed. It's disposable. Well, what do you mean? And you go, it looks like a desktop, but when you take the cover off, it's just got this little tiny board.
Little tiny board. proprietary power supply, or
It's
or the power supply is external.
yeah, exactly.
Like those
But on
ones,
the
though.
outside, it looks like a mid-sized tower. It's
Yeah,
deceiving. And
yeah.
so they don't realize that for years after they bought it. It's far too late.
They have no
It's
idea.
done. And I feel bad. I have to break that news to them. It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely it's hard because, and like there's some brands that are like the availability of like part supply is almost non-existent. I mean, talk about laptop parts and stuff like that. I'm not sure. Do you do a lot of laptop repair, or do you?
So the laptop I repair is I'm not going to do hinges. I'm not going to do backlights. I'm not going to do power jacks. The most common repairs. But if I want to upgrade the RAM, or the Windows isn't booting anymore, or it's crashing all the time, yes, I will do those. And I have to say, the laptops are getting harder and harder for me to even see them. Like the parts are getting so small, and the connectors are getting so fragile.
Absolutely.
And my eyes are not getting any better. I mean, I've never had to wear glasses. I've always had good vision, but somewhere around my mid-40s, things started getting harder to read.
Sure.
And I thought they were just making the font smaller. It's not me. So now every year progresses, and the magnification I need to see detail keeps increasing. And they say, well, welcome to getting older, And I'm like, yeah, but that happens to other people. That doesn't happen to me. And I'm like, I don't know how to break this to you, but it is happening to you, and it happens to everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
So as they continue to micronize and make this technology smaller, they're also using more and more plastics. So then I have the fear of, cracking the back open of the laptop, that I'm not going to break any of the little plastic clippies.
Oh, it's so easy to.
And especially the older the laptop is, and the older it is, the more likely it needs a repair, the more brittle it becomes. And for what I'm getting paid, we're almost at a point, when we hear about right to repair and all this other stuff, it's almost at the point of why bother? Like if I can go on eBay, say you've got a laptop that's 6 years old, and I'm having a problem with it. And of course it's going to need a battery at that point regardless.
Yeah.
And I just look on eBay, because that's probably the only place I'm going to be able to get legitimate, authentic donor parts is from another machine. There's a good chance that other machine's in better shape than yours, and I just swap them out and you're good to go. Have a nice day. You don't need me. I'm just a middleman. You could do this yourself.
Yeah. Just moving the drive over and
right. So if I was doing laptop repair, then I'd want to keep a bunch of old laptops around as potential donors, but there's so many makes and models over the years.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to put it anywhere, and the cost of storage would be more than how much money I'd be making. So that doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't you rather just get a brand new laptop with a shiny new screen and a new battery and a new warranty, running the latest version of Windows, and you have peace of mind that you're under warranty? Treat yourself, especially if your older laptop was not, let's say it wasn't a Dell XPS or anything, but just a midline $500 laptop. Didn't you get your money's worth out of it after 5 or 6 years?
Oh yeah, if you made it that long without the type of laptop, you got your value.
I've got people showing me 10-year-old laptops.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't owe you anything now. It was never really designed to run 10 years. It's running great, Carey. What are you talking about? I'm not saying it's not going to run great. I'm just saying that you're on a second life. You're onto your third life. It doesn't have 9 lives. It really was intended to have 1.
No, these systems were built disposable from the,
because it's cheaper to wait a minute. It's cheaper to build them disposable, and the consumer wants to buy overall the cheapest thing.
Yeah,
and then complain you can't repair it. It's like, well, it makes my head hurt.
Yeah,
people go, it's what hard. About all the e-waste? You're like, well, you're the one buying it. Stop buying it.
So it's a very hard situation. I think, from my perspective, because I do a decent amount of laptop repair stuff, and there's stuff I won't do. I don't.
What's your most common laptop repair?
Probably batteries, screen, or hinges. Those are going to be the top 3. And those are going to be pretty much like the only thing you can really do. Outside of like software related or like maybe like a drive or, RAM. But let's just say of the actual like laptop component aspect of it, the battery, hinges, and screen are going to be the three most common things to go out. And typically what do fail. The hinges are not getting any better. That's because it's how they're manufactured. They basically, they do those mold injections with the little metal nuts, and they break off, and then all of a sudden your hinge rips right off your back of your screen. So that's a really common one, and those happen on people's systems that are like a year old, and it's that part's crazy.
And I will do one of those. I'll do the battery repair.
Yeah.
But I'll refer them to you if they want anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's and even then it's expensive. I mean,
yeah.
And getting genuine parts is hard too. Like there's sometimes I can't get the part. Like for instance, if you want to do, let's say most of the time when the hinge breaks, it's because it breaks off from the back cover of the screen. That's typically where the hinge. It's not the hinge. The metal hinge is perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's the mounting
point. Mount. Yeah, exactly. The mounting points. It's those metal inserts on the plastic. You can do a janky fix where you can drill out and put, but I don't do that.
You're really good.
I refuse to do that. I won't do it for people. I know another shop that will do it, and I'll point them there. I don't like putting my name associated with that. So with those ones, you have to buy that back cover. But to get the back cover, I don't like buying, unless like we can't find anything. I don't like buying that part from, where you're not getting a guaranteed OEM part. So
yeah, because the customer is expecting a guarantee.
Exactly, they're expecting it. And the thing is, normally the only reason when I don't is because I have to tell them, look, there's nothing from any of these suppliers. If you want to proceed, I can find one. I can't guarantee the same quality, or I can't guarantee, but this is the situation of whatever you're dealing with. And, the problem is like, there's not that many suppliers for like the plastics of laptops that have OEM parts. And I think the only company that actually has a decent like service library of parts, like for like a parts store, like HP's parts store is a joke. It doesn't really work. Dell doesn't have a parts store. Lenovo is the only one that has a parts store that sometimes has parts. And then there are some third-party companies that sell OEM parts, but it's like hit or miss. Dell has a really good one. There's a really good third-party Dell company. He's actually the company. They actually make videos here on YouTube too, and they're pretty good. That's Parts People.
Yeah, Dell. Yeah, I agree.
They're for a Dell product. Yes, they're very good. Great guys. So I would say like Dell, yes. Lenovo, you can get most of the time you can get the stuff from their store. HP doesn't really have a ton of like third-party suppliers, and they don't really have a first-party supplier either. So it gets tricky.
I want to switch back over to your channel for a minute.
Sure.
Let me do this. I want to go full screen. Hey, I'm figuring StreamYard out. Look at me go. And I want to see what your most popular video is.
Laptop
it's
coolers.
About a laptop.
Yep, laptop coolers.
Go figure. Cooling pads. I hate cooling pads.
Yep.
They're so inconvenient. It kind of ruins the whole point of having a laptop. But
yeah, but when you have an old laptop that's falling apart and the fans don't work very well, or not that the fans don't work well, but they're poorly designed to begin with, they can make a difference.
What else do we have in here? Look at all these views. All right, broken screen, data recovery. More cooling.
Most of the stuff I do would probably be on the short side. That's probably the more.
Oh yeah, 1:12 here.
Yeah, that was a short one. But yeah, if you go to the shorts tab, there's probably more of what I do on a regular basis.
Well, that's where I need to start looking then, because that's going to be more frequent.
Yeah, this is every day.
Every day. Yeah, you did mention every day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Look at that case. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's the old Antec. I think land something. I don't know.
Toebreaker.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
PC maintenance. GPU upgrade. Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's talk about tools. And
Sure.
here's my deal. Let me go back full screen for a second. Hopefully this will work for me and put you on the screen too. Okay. I get questions from people that they want to learn how to become a tech, but they don't.
Yep.
They say things like, how come you don't use a PCI diagnostic card? How come you don't use a power supply tester? How come you don't wear an anti-static wrist strap? How come I guess that doesn't have anything to do with it, but they want the technology
To answer the problem.
to replace them. In other words, for me, and I started in this business in the early 1990s, 91,
Sure.
professionally, and before that it was a hobby. And working in for companies, it's always about time. Let's go. And you're being compared against your coworkers about how many average computers did you fix in this period of time, where you're averaging 3 a day. And if you don't do enough, they're going to bring into a review meeting and say, you're going to have to step it up. If you do too many, your coworkers are going to say, you're making us all look bad, slow down. So somewhere in there, you find your groove. And what I have found is that power supply testers are expensive. They don't put a load on the power supply.
Yeah.
So so you get voltage. So what?
Sure.
I can get in a car and the radio works, but the engine won't turn over.
Sure.
It's still 12 volts.
Yeah.
And people don't get it. And I'm like, look, a power supply tester is about $200+ You have to carry it around with you. You have to know how to use it.
Sure.
And you could switch the power supply out, even just plug the 2 power supply cables into the motherboard.
You only need
it's $40.
And, EPS.
Right. So let me give you a little backstory. When just to give you an idea of my logic is, it's always about I'm trying to be practical and pragmatic. Okay. So when I was working at Intel, and this was 1993, 94, a friend of mine that worked there came over to my desk and he was really excited. He said, Carey, you've got to see this. This is the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it? What is it? He says, come over to my cubicle, and we go over there and he goes to his keyboard. He goes to his mouse. He goes, look at my screen. That's the weather satellite. And it shows it's 106 degrees outside with clear skies. And there's a window right here. You can just look out the window.
You can walk outside. You'll know how hot it is probably.
He's like, but I'm connected through the internet to a weather satellite and I can see the weather. And I'm like, and?
Yeah.
But, the internet was new and it's still like the Mosaic browser. This is all back in the day. And
Sure.
even as he was amazed and so fascinated by the technology, I'm thinking, what's the point? Like, I don't get it. When people started getting smartphones and I still had a flip phone, why don't you have a flip phone? It's a phone. I use it to make and receive phone calls.
Okay.
And I'd say, well, give me an example of how I would use my phone differently. What do you use the smartphone part? And this is still when people were moving into smartphones and I was probably holding onto my flip phone much longer than most people.
Sure.
And I was resistant to it because the last thing I need is to be addicted to this stupid thing, which I am now. And I knew that was going to happen. So I was putting it off. I don't need it. I've never had it. I don't miss it. They go, well, you can check movie times. Do you do that a lot?
Yeah.
What else can you do with it?
Yeah.
Well, you can watch movies. Man, I'm not watching movies on a little tiny screen. I grew up in the 80s as a teenager. I want the biggest screen. I want the best audio. I want to see the special effects and the money that went into the sound and the effects. I don't want to watch it on what is this? Come on, give me a break. If I was on public transportation in a crowded city like New York or Chicago, and I'm just trying to sit on the train and find something to do, okay, but I'm not. So that's not going to work for me. What else do you use it for? Well, you can use it for, I don't know. It was all stuff I'm like, I don't do any of that. Like, I'm not driving in the car going, I wonder what time movies start. Like, it's a spontaneous thing. So eventually, though, as smartphones started to improve and you were able to now start checking your email. Yeah. And then my attitude was, look, there's If you even go before that, I was late to even get a cell phone at all. They're like, why don't you have one? I said, there's no call that's so important that it's going to interrupt me driving. Just whatever it is, it can wait till I get to where I go, and I can, back then we had a pager, and it will beep, and you just call back the number and find out what's going on. But you couldn't do that when you're in the car. You still had to wait till you got somewhere to use a phone. Yeah. So I grew used to that, and I never complained. I wasn't like, gee, I wish I could just take a phone with me everywhere. It's super convenient, especially if you're in a traffic accident or you see something where you can call the police. You don't have to go find a payphone or one of the blue emergency phones that we used to have to look for, or knock on somebody's door and say, can I use your phone? So, there's a lot of plus sides to it, but was not an early adopter. And it was very expensive. You had to pay, heck, even on internet, you paid per minute for AOL to use dial-up. You paid for every text message you would send on a phone.
Sure.
You had certain hours of the day that you could call for free.
The peak hours.
So it's all changed now. It's all become a lot cheaper. These are now replacing people's computers, and I am seeing the decline of business from consumers in my business. Mm-hmm. And I believe what's happening is everybody's going, this is all I need, or a tablet. I don't need the whole computer anymore, because they're not creators and they're not gamers. Have you found that to be affecting you as well, that most consumers now are, unless they're gamers, just not interested in having a PC anymore?
I think there's a shift. There's a shift of that. I think there's two shifts. I think there's one that's going to the disposable tech, I think, that we've kind of talked about, where people are like, I'll go buy if I need to go in, a laptop to be on the internet, I'll buy a Chromebook or something that I can throw away in a couple of years. Or there's also the people that are like, I got my tablet, I can get away with, 90% of what I want to do anyways. I'm not doing anything that requires it. So yes, that is the case. I would say from the consumer perspective, yes. I think in the business perspective, I think there's part of that. I do a lot of work for like service-based companies, and we used to deploy people with laptops in the field. We can deploy them with a smartphone; they can do the same thing. So yeah, that area definitely is changing. Where once we had these aspects of being able to connect back to the office mobily from a phone, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and businesses are generally creating, right? So it's still the desktops. They're selling 300 million desktops between Dell and HP and Lenovo, and they're not going to consumers mostly. They're going to businesses that need that to actually work, to make a living. Mm-hmm. And it's people's, whether we're talking the employees or we're talking about management, this is how they have a career. And those are very serious tools, which gets me back to what I was going with before I got sidetracked. The tools. When you're diagnosing computers, do you use any sort of a tool that tells you what's wrong with the computer, like a PCI diagnostic card, or do you rely on beeps, or do you utilize the error codes on a motherboard if it has such, or error LEDs? Or
I use the error LEDs probably more than anything.
And do you find that they're accurate?
No, but they're usually good. They're usually pointing in the right direction.
Well, I'll give you an example. If a motherboard LED says RAM,
yes,
sometimes it has nothing to do with the RAM. It has to do with the power.
CPU. Yeah. I mean that, but it does. Typically, what I've found is that it usually can narrow down your diagnostic process to maybe 2 or 3 options immediately. So let's just say a post error, right? So like the system's failing to post. So during that process of where it fails to post, if you get one of those like diagnostic LEDs and it says RAM, well, you're automatically, in most cases when you go through that process, you can usually assume the chance of what's going to cause that is down to maybe 3 components. It's a good solution. It's not perfect. I've had weird ones where where people get the where they've gotten the GPU LED on one motherboard, but it actually had to do with that one of the hard drives was throwing a short.
Yep.
But like that, you're not going to figure that out otherwise, like unless you're testing everything. But
well, let me counter that. I think I'm so clever, but if a computer, in my opinion, if it has a hardware problem,
yeah,
so we know, it's not turning on, we're not getting a post screen.
Sure.
I can tell you what that is using my two hands in under 10 minutes. Because at the end of the day, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug everything off the board except motherboard power and, the two power connectors to the board.
Sure.
If I need the graphics card, I'll keep it in. But if there's built-in graphics, we're going to temporarily take that out. Any USB devices, we take them out. Sound, take it out.
Yeah.
Any additional drives, we're going to unplug them from power and data. We're going to unplug the front port panel switch. We're going to unplug all the front port USB. All we're going to do is we're going to check the bare minimums. I don't have to take it out of the case. And I'm going to turn the machine on with just the power supply, motherboard, RAM, CPU. And if there's an M.2 or a boot drive, I'm not even going to use a boot drive.
You just want to see if it gets a BIOS.
But if it's a socketed in, I'll leave it in. But if it's a cable, I'm unplugging it. So we just have keyboard, mouse, monitor, and power. No internet, nothing else. Then, if anything happens, I'm going to pull the CMOS battery. I'm going to check the voltage on it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump the CMOS to clear it. Still nothing. The next step is I'm removing all the RAM modules but one. Yep. Still nothing. Take that RAM module out I left in, swap it with one that I previously removed. Still nothing. Try a different RAM socket. Yeah. Still nothing. It's not the RAM. It's not the sockets. Jump a power supply on there. It doesn't have to be installed. Just put it on the counter, plug a power supply in. Does it boot? Okay, it's not the power supply. So what is that leaving us with? Very quickly, we can find out, well, now we're down to, let's say, motherboard, CPU. Then maybe take the M.2 out if it has one, just to be thorough. But motherboard and CPU, and in my experience, CPUs very rarely go bad. It's probably the board. But then the final thing would be take the board out of the case just to see if anything is like a standoff or something is
they didn't install it properly, and it's
right. But I won't do that unless I have to. So now I've got it out of the case with my own power supply, because I leave their power supply in the case now. My keyboard, my mouse, my monitor. That's it. I just jump the power and let's see if it does anything. And if it doesn't, if I have a spare CPU that'll fit, I'll pop it in there and see. But usually it's the motherboard in that case. And that whole process usually takes under 10 minutes. Now, if it's a problem that only happens sometimes, or it's a crashing problem in Windows, different story.
Oh, yeah.
So for that reason, I don't see any value in diagnostic LEDs. I don't see any value in power supply testers or PCI. This is the tool I use. And if there was a tool that could replace this, I don't know how I would earn a living anymore. So be careful what you wish for is what I tell these people in the chat. Sure. Because if it could do that, then it probably could use the computer too. And we don't need you. You work yourself right out of a purposeful existence.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with that. Like, honestly, when you're dealing with, when you're dealing with hardware issues, let's just say like a post issue, I mean, the best way is basically narrowing down your variables that you're dealing with. That is probably the fastest solution. I don't use a power supply hardware loader. I will use like a dry fire power supply tool just to do a quick check voltage because sometimes you'll be able to see it from that, but honestly you'll know it if you plug in another power supply. Really, you only use that because like you did it with your power supply and you just want to see what the issue was. Yeah, you can check it. And I use that, but again, that's like a $40 part, $40 tool. And that's not, I'm not buying the load tools. You're not going to be doing any realistic. It doesn't make any sense realistically for, general repair when it comes to that. And then like the PCIe testers, I don't think they're accurate, and most of them are all dated. So I wouldn't trust them anyways. And then the beeps and stuff like that, On pre-built, yes, those are accurate. If you have a Dell or an HP or a Lenovo and you get like a beep code or a power LED code, they're usually pretty accurate.
Okay.
But on let's say desktop hardware, like from a board from Asus, MSI, Gigabyte, ASRock, any of those brands, the beep codes are inconsistent, are not usually accurate, and are not always the most helpful. I do like the diagnostic LED to have because it's a good indicator when somebody is getting stuck. Like, it's great when you're on the phone with somebody and they're telling you like, okay, I have this issue, and you tell them, well, can you look in the top right of your motherboard, or do you see any LEDs up there? And they're like, oh, I see an orange LED. At least I get an idea ahead of time before they bring their system in, where I can get a pretty good understanding of like, okay, well, we're probably dealing with a post error. It means we're dealing with a hardware issue. We're not, because people sometimes don't know the best way to describe what their problem is.
Yeah.
It's a good tool for that aspect. I don't think they're, like I said, perfectly accurate, but it is a good starting point to have. But honestly, it's not what's going to, solve your problem at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's more information. It may be helpful, it may not be.
Yeah.
And because it's not always helpful, I
Yeah.
just try not to rely on it. But I will look to see, am I seeing progress? Are the
Yeah.
lights moving? If
Yeah.
they're not moving, or they, first of all, they don't all move in the same pattern or with the same
Yeah.
delay. So I'll just wait and say, okay, well, something's frozen here. I've waited long enough. I don't know what that is, but it's not right.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is confirming we're having a boot issue somewhere. So it's not that they're completely worthless. It's just the amount of data I get from it, or rather, I should say the viewers that'll say, "Well, my motherboard says I have bad." They're thinking the misconception is
that
it's telling you what it is. And my logic is, well, if it knew what it is, why couldn't it just fix it? What does it need you for?
Yeah.
The other thing is, if it's not working right, then how can you trust the diagnostic is accurate? It's broken. So if it was working, you wouldn't need the diagnostic. If it's broken, how do you know the diagnostic's working and that the broken part of it isn't affecting the accuracy of the diagnostic? They're connected together.
Yeah, I mean they are dependent. Like even like I think of like one of the most common ones I see all the time is it's really common for people to get the CPU LED, and it's after they upgrade their CPU, but they realize they don't need they need a BIOS update beforehand. And like, again, they're like, oh, my new CPU is bad. But in reality, it's a BIOS update that they just didn't do ahead of time because they were on an old BIOS version, and maybe they went from like a 7,000 Ryzen to a 9,000, and that happens all the time. Or even if they go to the same generation, they just go from like they had a 7600X and they went to the X3D CPU, and they bought that motherboard pretty early on and never updated their BIOS. Yeah, you'll see that type of thing. And technically, yes, the LED is correct.
Yeah.
But the reasoning why is more tricky than anything. I think that's
great example.
Yeah.
That was a great example. Although I don't see many customers just upgrading a CPU.
Yeah.
Now, your power supply tester that you check, how many times has it actually helped you? I'm just curious because I got a feeling probably for
I typically know if it's I'm typically certain it's a power supply issue if it's a power supply issue. Like I could get away without it, but I do have it.
Is that like just like you're confirming?
It's confirmation.
Okay.
Because it's more of like I just want to see because you could test the pins individually with the multimeter, but it just does it for you.
Right.
So
but I mean, it works or doesn't work. Who cares why? That's what I'm getting at. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, sure.
But I was, again, in the corporate
environment. Maybe
environment.
it's also easier to explain to the customer why. Like
that kills me when customers want to know why. Because a lot of times, we don't know why.
Yeah, because I usually use like this one. Just like it's real cheap. I think Thermaltake makes it. The Dr. Power 3.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's 24 pin. You got both your 8 pins Molex SATA, and then the 12 plus 4 pin as well. So basically, when you hook it up, it turns the power supply on. So it jumps the power supply without being connected to your motherboard, turns it on, reads out the voltage that it's sending over each of those particular connectors, whatever ones you want to test. Typically, you really only need to test a 24-pin, 8-pin, and whatever your PCIe connector, if you have one, is, to tell you a pretty good idea of what's going on. And other than that, it's like it's not going to load test or anything. But for
Does it tell you? Does it tell you your power supply temp, or if your power supply fan is running or clogged with dust?
No, it does not tell you that one.
But have you ever had to change a power supply for those reasons?
Because of dust or like fan not running?
Yeah.
The fan failure can cause power supply to overheat, but it's pretty rare.
Okay. I'm just saying for our audience, not for you.
Yeah.
That in your example there, you're covering a very specific.
Sure.
It's not 100% coverage. You're just looking.
No. All I want to do is I just want to know, like, okay, is it because of a lack of voltage, or is it because maybe it was plugged in wrong? I don't know when the customers bring in the state that people bring in their computers is, if you've worked in this industry, you've seen weird stuff.
Yeah. How did this ever work?
Choices.
You look at it, you're like,
I mean, I found a frog in a computer once.
A frog?
Yeah.
Living?
No, it was dead. It was tucked under the power supply, and that guy lived nowhere near water. Never had a pet frog.
How does that even happen?
I don't know, but this is like that's why sometimes I do like to have. This is the only tool I would say confirmation, that and battery tester, CMOS battery for the CMOS batteries. But you could do again with a multimeter if you wanted to.
Show me that tester again. I want to see.
So it can do regular batteries, but it also can do button batteries.
Does it show you voltage, or is it just got a little red, yellow, green?
It's just red, yellow kind of thing.
See,
you can get ones with the voltage, but
yeah, I need to see the voltage. I can't. I don't know what yellow means. I don't know what red. I mean, I get an idea red, but the question is. So I used to have one of those, and I realized I couldn't tell how bad the battery was. So I really wanted to know the voltage, and you're right. These are really not any more expensive.
Yeah.
And then you can test button cells and everything. But now I can see how many volts are on there.
Sure.
It's pretty bad when I put a CMOS battery in there and nothing happens.
You can see error or something like that.
No.
Yeah. I mean, that's
because this has no battery in it. So if the battery, it's got to use the battery to display the voltage.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if the battery's dead, it's like it's just dead. I'm like, okay, well, then I wonder if my tester's broken.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with the CMOS batteries, typically they're either gone or they're still working. Like, for the most part, as long as they are there, they're like, if they're functioning, even if they're not, the charge is a little low, they're usually
good enough.
Good enough to like do what they need to do. And even then, the batteries, when they do fail on most modern boards, don't affect a whole lot these days, because it doesn't automatically clear the CMOS like it once did. On the older boards, yes, it does, but on the newer boards, typically it doesn't cause the same issues as they once did. But on like old systems or like pre-built systems, it can throw some weird errors sometimes.
The system may not even turn on if a BIOS battery's dead.
I had one like last week or something, I think.
I've got a question here. We're just over 2 hours, and I appreciate you've been with me this long, and I still have another 3 hours worth of questions for you, but we'll save it for next time. I hope you'll come back. Barry Klein has a question here that I think will be a good one to sort of wrap it up with. Do you have what is your most memorable WTF moment client story?
I think the frog story.
Yeah,
I mean,
crazy.
Guy came in, wanted a system upgrade. We were going to do a few different things. Then we were going to do a power supply, new motherboard. I mean, we're keeping the case, I think, and like maybe the GPU, but there was a couple things he wanted to do. But his particular reasoning, he needed a faster CPU for his particular task. It was like more of like a workstation, less of a gaming system. And he brought it in. I got it on the bench. I was going to do I think it was like a Saturday. So nobody's in the area like here. So like I'm just by myself in the shop, taking things apart. I had like pre-built his motherboard off to the side and kind of just got that prepped. Went to take his system apart, just popped the power supply forward, and all of a sudden I just see two little eyes looking back at me. And I'm like, what is that? I pull out my phone and I start filming it, and I pull it away, and there's just a little frog like smushed underneath that power supply that just looked like he just got cooked from that. Probably trying to find heat or something, but I don't know exactly how it got there. I called the guy that day. I was like, I left. I was like, I'm done. I'm like, I
Check,
tossed
please.
it out, and then I'm like, I'm not working on the computer the rest of the day. I'm gonna go home and go. It was Saturday too, so I was like, I'm not. I was being nice coming and working on it for him. I was like, I'm gonna take a break. So I called him. I'm like, you live near water? Have you ever had a pet frog? He's like, no, I've never lived anywhere near water. Like the closest water would be like, like 5-6 miles away or something. And there's no creek and no pool, nothing. So I don't know where the frog came from. And I'm like, I don't know. And I was blown away by what you could find for, for like a system like that. I was like, that's
I wonder
a fun one.
if that was a prince that just never got kissed, and that's what happens when
It's
you don't kiss
possibility.
the frog.
Yeah, who knows?
I want to show everybody your channel here on YouTube one more time and encourage them to go check it out and decide for yourselves if you like Matt's content, because I think if you like watching PC builds, repairs, practical advice from somebody who gets paid by customers professionally to do this work and is held accountable, so you want to see the side of it most enthusiasts cannot show you because, well, they would never be on their radar because they don't do that kind of work. So for me, finding a YouTube channel that does the work and shows the work that is professional, being held accountable for the work, anytime I find those and they're good, I want to bring it to my audience's attention, because I think if you like my content, you're going to love Matt's content. The channel's Matt's Computer Services, and we'll have a link, if we don't already, in our video notes, or you can just go to YouTube and search it as I did up here. And be sure and click on all the different tabs here, because YouTube now separates things out. So even I got caught up by not looking at the shorts. I don't normally watch shorts, so I was a little concerned when I saw your latest video was a month ago.
Yeah.
But and people do the same thing to me. They go, well, you're late. And I go, you got to click on the live tab.
Live, right?
For me,
Yeah.
I wish they would. Oh, look, there you are.
Yeah.
Are you simulcasting that? Or
Yes, I am.
Right on. Love it. So to all your viewers, thank you for hanging out with us. To you yourself, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you here and talking to you, and meeting a peer in the industry that I can really relate to, and also introduce our audience to. So what's interesting is we didn't really disagree on much. No. And I bet we'll have to come on next time and find something we disagree on. And then,
absolutely.
You give your reasoning and I'll give mine, and let the audience choose which one. Not publicly, they can keep it to themselves, but just to give them
tell the audience to keep them to themselves. That's fun.
That's what I'm saying. They're sort of like when they used to do movie reviews, like Siskel and Ebert, and people would, they watch these movie critics,
sure,
and people would generally have their favorite. But what I'm getting at is, there's not necessarily a right way or an only way. There's lots of different ways we can go about diagnosing or repairing a computer. And when you're doing this for a living, what anybody else thinks that is not the paying customer is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. So as long as you're doing your job right, then you're in business. And the fact that you've been in business as long as you have, you're doing things right. It doesn't matter if I agree, and I probably do, but I still think it would be an interesting debate, if you will, to find something where
let's do it.
We do kind of there's this, okay, but there's that kind of a thing. And maybe we can look for that, because quite honestly, some people are put off by that. They're like, oh, you're just challenging. Like, no, I'm not. I'm genuinely interested in perspectives that are valid alternatives. Is the glass half full? well, it's half empty, or the glass is too big, or the glass is too small. All of those are valid, accurate answers. But generally, as human beings, we only provide, usually, from my experience, our only perspective, not other people's. And it doesn't invalidate somebody's opinion or perspective. It's making the audience aware they have choices. And it's for them to make the choice, whichever one resonates with them best. And it's right for them. And then for somebody else, the other person's right. Anyway, I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's figure something out.
That's what I want to hear. Well, thank you again. It's been great talking to you. It's been great meeting you. I've been enjoying your content as well for some time. And my biggest regret is not having you on earlier. But we got to start somewhere. Better late than never. And and I wish you much success. Keep doing what you're doing. I really enjoy your content. I strongly recommend my viewers subscribe, check it out, decide for themselves. It'll cost them nothing. And we'll look forward to bringing you back on again here, hopefully within about a month or so, and we'll pick up where we left off.
Sounds good to me. All right. Thank you so much, Carey, for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. So on behalf of Matt and myself, thank you all for joining us and interacting with us today. We certainly appreciate you being here and interacting, being a part of this event. And if there's other content creators that you're interested in this space that you would like to see an interview with, be sure and leave it in the comments below. Thank you to our friends at SCD Keys, where we get our Windows and Office license keys. The coupon code Carey gets you 30% off. And all of the links for everything we discussed are all in the video notes below, including how to reach out to us in our forums and an email. All of that is below the video in our video description. Thank you all for hanging out. Thank you to all the members who make these videos possible. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I'll be live to finish the mini ITX build. I've got a case. I've got a power supply. Last week, we prepped the motherboard, which is a ASRock B650i Lightning with a 9600X. And I just put a temporary cooler on it because I wasn't quite sure, depending on which case I was going to use, what cooler was going to work. So I'm still undecided. I have an air cooler and an all-in-one. I don't know if the air cooler will be enough. If so, my preference is the air cooler. If not, the case I purchased has room for a 240 or up to a 280. Maybe I'll break out the Arctic cooler out of its box and hook it up. I got to do something with it. So I hope you'll join us for that video. It'll be live tomorrow at 1 o'clock Pacific time. And thanks, of course, to Mara, who does all of our administrative tasks in the background. And thanks to all of you. Until next time, bye for now.